full screen here so I can see my other screen. There we go. Okay, we have sounds that shouldn't be here. Thank you. Can we just take any sounds that are here? Okay, all right, so we're starting. Who do we have in the house? Let me just make sure everybody's here. Please unmute yourself. Hi, Shay, how's it going? Unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself, unmute yourself, unmute yourself. And I think we have everyone. All right, so we're gonna do an intro. And some of us have done the intro before, but we're gonna do it again because I think we're live now. Shay. All right, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Boys
and welcome. Welcome.
DJ, please unmute yourself. Mr. DJ.
Please unmute yourself.
Mr. DJ,
Mr.
unmute
DJ,
yourself, please.
No, Mr. DJ is unmuted. Mr. Mayo, please unmute
yourself. Yes, you should unmute yourself.
Okay, here we go. Unmute yourself. Perfect. And we are live on YouTube. So again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome.
Okay.
You can mute yourself if there's background noise, right? So if there's background noise where you are, please mute yourself. And then when you want to talk, you can unmute yourself. Everybody's video is on, so we're looking good. And one last time, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Today's webinar is titled Introduction of
Data warning.
IP Niger FM, Beat FM, Classic FM, and Kenneth FM. My name is Faith History. I'm a tech expert, on-air personality, and I'm going to be your moderator today. So welcome to everyone. And now I'd like to introduce you to our iconic panelists. I'm going to start with today's host, Mr. Mayo Ailara, who is the CEO of MCSN, that's the Musical Copyright Society of Nigeria. And so we're going to start there. And hold on one quick second. I was taking over my spot. And then, okay, I've already introduced myself. I'd also like to introduce, so first, a little bit about Mr. Mayo Ailara. He is a renowned copyright expert and a living historian of copyright administration in Nigeria, a contributor to the final draft of the Nigerian Copyright Act. So, so that's very important to know, sort of like his history. Even myself, I'm still finding out more about him and everything that he's done for the industry. So, welcome, sir. Thank you so much for putting this event together. And I'd also like to introduce, thank you so much, sir. I'd also like to introduce Mr. Orit Wiliki, who's the chairman for the MCSN as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Orit Wiliki.
Thank you.
Hi, welcome,
Hi.
welcome. Good to see you again, right?
Same here.
We have history, Do we have Mr. Austin Amodu,
Yes.
sorry, in the house?
I'm right here.
Okay, okay, how are you, sir? He's the
Hi,
director of regulatory department. Welcome, sir. And he's going to talk to us later about the implications of the deployment. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
Next up, that I'd like to recognize Mr. Obi Ezelo, the NCC director in charge of enforcement. Mr. Obi.
Good day.
Here we go.
Pleasure
All right,
being here.
I see you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us. Next up, I'd like to introduce Ms. Folari Oludayo. She manages the CMO desk, and she's the Assistant Chief Copyright Officer at the NCC. She in the house, the digital house. She here? Okay, haven't seen her. Okay, so we're not sure if she was able to join us, but I do know Mrs. Susan Basharu, Deputy Director of Regulatory at NCC, is here with us.
Hi, everybody.
Basharu.
How are you doing?
Hi, ma'am. Thank you. Welcome. All right, next up, all the way from Australia, I'd like to introduce Frank Roddy. He's a CMO expert, APRA, AMCO. And Frank is an innovation lead within APRA AMCO's research and development team and the organization's electronic music specialist. So he's going to be talking to us a little bit about case studies, about what works and how this has been implemented in, in Australia. He's a driving force behind the implementation of music recognition technology all throughout Australia. And, just developing more effective distribution practices for electronic music, so that's really important. Frank, thank you for joining us. Apparently it's past midnight in Australia?
It's past midnight, but it's a pleasure to be part of this panel, so great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Up next, I'd like to recognize Mr. Kenny Ogungbe. Is he in the house? In the digital house? Not yet. Is he in? Oh, yes. All right, Mr. Kenny Ogungbe, he's the CEO for Kenny's Music. He would be classified as a user. He's a foremost pioneer of record labeling in Nigeria. So he's a Nigerian DJ, music producer. So many of us know him, also a TV presenter and music executive. And he's a founder of Kenny's Music. If you all know Kenny's Music, they made the careers of Two-Face, Tony Titula, so many others. And so we want to welcome you to the house, to Digital House today. Welcome, sir. And I'd like to also introduce and recognize the presence of some iconic musicians in the music industry in Nigeria. Rugged Man, Nigerian artist, launched himself into the music industry all the way back in 1999. Ruggedy, you all do. Small.
Thank you, man.
The most featured
Nice to
rapper
be
in
here.
Nigeria. Yes, thank you so much. And you've worked, of course, with so many international acts, and you are quite a force to be reckoned with. A graduate of political science from Lagos State University, Ojo. And Diva in the house, Shay, singer-songwriter, artist extraordinaire, Nigerian-based singer-songwriter, just phenomenal talent, and businesswoman, independent businesswoman. We're very excited to have you here. You are part of the record industry, the music industry, and we really look up to you. So we're very excited that you're here. And a lot of people know Shay.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Yes. And on the artist management end, we have Godwin Tom, CEO of I Manage Africa. He's in the house with us. He's the founder of the Godwin Tom Company, and they manage talent and events. So that is what they do, developing tailor-made strategies that will suit business needs and goals of their clients. So across Africa, he's doing great work. Godwin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and now, last but not the least, our guest of honor for today, the Director General of the Nigerian Copyright Commission, NCC, which is the regulatory body for copyright administration for the entire creative industry in Nigeria, Mr. John Asien. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. And without much ado, then I'm going to have you, Mr. John Asien, flag off the World Music Day celebratory address today. And I'll hand over the mic to you.
Thank you so much. I didn't know I was going to come in so early. I thank all the panelists for making our time to join this webinar. I thank the organizers for what's looking like a wonderful job. And especially I'll welcome Frank Roddy. I know it's quite late in Australia, and virtually I welcome you to Nigeria, more or less. I'll welcome Frank Roddy. I know it's quite late in Australia, and virtually I welcome you to Nigeria, more or less. Today being the World Music Day, I would say happy World Music Day to everyone out there. And incidentally, it's also the Father's Day. So for the fathers in the house or listening, I would say happy Father's Day. Now, it's interesting to have this discussion at a time like this, on a day that has to do with music, and a time when we are all beginning to define what we now call the new normal. So it's a good time to see how we can do business in some alternative fashion and help the music industry to grow. Now, for the Nigerian Copyright Commission, it's also a day to renew our commitment to building stronger synergies with the different sectors of the copyright industry, and to build a copyright system that works for the ultimate benefit of rights owners. That is our primary goal. For us, the real success of a CMO is measured by the effectiveness of its collection and distribution function. As a veritable or a verifiable, with a verifiable mechanism to track what goes on and how much comes in that process. So for us, looking at the technology that we can use to track, to monitor, and to manage the distribution process is certainly a good thing to have at this time. So for us, a CMO must be held to a high standard of accountability, and the Commission will not sit back and watch the funds of CMOs being treated as if they were the private funds of individuals or wasted on self-serving programs and projects that do not benefit members. This is why I'm enthused by the prospect of a technology-based solution to the effective measurement, monitoring, tracking of the use of music and the income that is due to right owners. So this should help us to address the critical issues of transparency and accountability in this area. Well, I do not know much about the technology. I'm here to also listen and learn, but I do believe, without preempting the presentations from the panelists, that this technology, this platform, this facility will, one, help to track and measure the volume of music and the use of music in different platforms. It should also help to address the perceived arbitrariness of CMOs in tariff setting, and hopefully it should ease the tension between CMOs and the users of the works they manage. I also believe that we will look at how this technology will help to bridge
Faith, it says you muted everybody. Yes, I got a message saying the host muted everybody, so that's why I just got in.
Okay. I'm trying to unmute myself, but certainly the host has seems to have an override.
Okay, you're back. Okay, you're back on now. Yes, you're
okay.
Back.
I don't know where I stopped, but I guess I just mentioned that I'm hoping that the technology will provide us solutions on how to track and measure the volume of music used by the users and provide a credible basis for proper licensing. I'm hoping that the technology will help us to address the perceived arbitrariness of CMOs in tariff setting and hopefully ease the tension between CMOs and the users. I'm hoping that it will provide a bridge for the management of works across different categories and different platforms, especially now that we find a lot of works coming onto the same medium and belong to different genres or categories. I also hope that we'll have a technology that will help us upscale the transparency index of CMOs and facilitate the operational collaboration, the data collection, the measurement of the contribution of the creative sector to the GDP of this country. If we're able to achieve that, then we would have gone a long way. But we also believe that as the regulatory agency, we must begin to put in place some policy initiatives that will help to strengthen or complement the application of or deployment of these technology. For instance, we have a recent diagnostic study that is being carried out by AFD on CMOs in Nigeria. And so far, the first report from the study has been very revealing. We hope that the final report will help us to prepare for an overhaul of the regulatory framework for collective management of rights in Nigeria. While most players in the creative sector welcomed and commended the initiative, it is regrettable that a few, for reasons best known to them, refused to open their doors and their books for the study. But we have enough information to be able to work around the policy initiatives and the regulatory frameworks that will support our going forward. I will take this opportunity to again reassure stakeholders that the study is purely a fact-finding exercise. It's aimed at identifying the regulatory, the statutory, and the operational gaps in the CMO operations to inform better policy initiatives on the part of the NCC and support the CMOs to function more efficiently. The report of the study will hopefully be made available publicly upon the completion of the program, but we believe that we can begin to have some gains from the snippets of information that we have already begun to receive. The Commission will continue to encourage CMOs to embrace new business models and leverage on available technological solutions that would help them operate more efficiently and deliver on their primary mandate for the benefit of their members. And as a deliberate policy, the Commission is exploring ways of supporting CMOs to better enforce their rights, to better monitor uses, and collect the revenue due to them, while insisting on accountability and fair distribution to members. At the same time, we need to ensure that tariffs are fair, reasonable, and not unnecessarily burdensome. Members should be assisted to earn every naira due to them and should not be forced to take less under the guise of a general distribution. With available technology, we believe that Nigeria has reached a point where it should now be able to have title-specific distribution, particularly in the field of music. I'm looking forward to seeing how this technology will help us to have title-specific distribution for the benefit of your members. Now, for the new initiative to be effective, all players must agree to be subject to the rule of law, and no one CMO or person should be immune from sanctions as prescribed under the law. No one who means well for the creative industry would deny or undermine the provisions of the Copyright Act dealing with the regulation and effective supervision of CMOs. While we concede the positive affirmation of rights of individual owners, this does not derogate from the provisions empowering the Nigerian Copyright Commission to carry out regulatory, supervisory, and oversight functions. Fortunately, there are a whole lot of instruments for dealing with infractions, and indeed for dealing with rogue CMOs and persons whose activities may threaten the economic well-being of rights owners. We hope we won't have to deploy all those other sanctions, but certainly we will not watch any rogue CMO or any individual take the law for granted. With the benefit of hindsight and based on recent events showing how the management of a CMO can indeed slide into recklessness and develop a proclivity for tyranny and abuse of office, the liberal interpretation of Section 39(3), allowing for more than one CMO in respect of a class of corporate owners, must now be applauded. That has come to stay for now as the policy of government, since a CMO cannot, in the words of the Copyright Act, adequately protect the interests of a class of corporate owners unless that CMO and its managers run it according to the law. So in conclusion, I would say that transparency, accountability, and good governance remain the tripod for a successful and credible collective management system. It is my hope that panelists will guide us in finding how the technology we are looking at today will help us in achieving these objectives. Once again, as we celebrate the World Music Day, I look forward to a more rewarding music business and wish to assure all stakeholders that the Commission will not sit back and watch the earnings of any musician go into the wrong hands or go into the wrong projects or in any way be filtered away. So I wish you a wonderful, fruitful webinar. I will stay back and listen, and the recommendations from this panel will help us in driving the appropriate policy initiatives to make this technology workable. Thank you so much, and moderator, I return the mic to you.
Unmute myself. Okay, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. One of the major things that you talked about was the CMOs need to be transparent, right? So let's hear about the CMO who's put together this event. That's MCSN. The chairman, Mr. Orit Wilkie. I'm going to hand the mic over to you to tell us a little bit more about MCSN, its journey up to this point. I know we don't have a lot of time. We have just a little under an hour. So I'm going to ask everyone to just speak for 5 minutes each. 5 minutes. Mr. Orit Wilkie, chairman of MCSN, your turn.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Our guest of honor and keynote speaker, the Director General, Nigeria Copyright Commission, Mr. John Ohi Asheyin, Our panelists and iconic music heavyweights, Baba Ke Ugumbe, Ruggedy Baba, Rugged Man, Sheye She, Godwin Tom, and our Australia Sermo expert, Frank Roddy. Our moderator and tech expert, OAP, State History, good to see you again. Key stakeholders in the music and creative industry at large who are here with us today, and those who are watching online as well. Gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, about MCSN. MCSN was incorporated since 1984 as the owner, assignee, and exclusive licensee of copyright in the largest repertoire of musical works and sound recordings in Nigeria. A collective management organization, CMO, licensed and approved by the Nigeria Copyright Commission, NCC, and as educated upon by the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court of Nigeria to license copyright, collect royalties from users of musical works and sound recordings for onward distribution to rights owners. Ladies and gentlemen, join us as we celebrate the 2020 World Music Day. Happy World Music Day to everyone. Happy Music World to Nigeria. Happy Music World to the world at large. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you. Wow, that was good. On the money. I love it in terms of time. Okay, I'm going to hand the mic over for the big announcement to the CEO of MCSN, Mr. Mayo Wa Aguilara. Please unmute yourself, Mr. Aguilara. Okay, there you go. So I'm going to hand over to you for the big announcement.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. It's really a pleasure to be here. Our guest of honor and keynote speaker, the Director General of the Nigerian Copyright Commission, Mr. John Ohi Asein. I stand all other protocols duly reserved. It is with great excitement and happiness that I welcome you to this epoch-making event today. I especially thank the Director General of the NCC for his kind acceptance of our invitation to attend this event and deliver a keynote address that will most certainly show us the path to follow post-COVID-19 pandemic in our country, which he has certainly done. I also thank everyone who also kindly accepted our invitation and are attending this event today. On this beautiful day, set aside for the celebration of music globally, and on behalf of the Musical Copyright Society of Nigeria, MCSN, I hereby announce the deployment of our in-house breakthrough technology, the MCSN Go Create app. I'm glad to tell you that the pre-registration drive will commence tomorrow, Monday, June 22nd, 2020. The app will be available in all app stores by the first day of July 2020, where everyone can access through your iOS, your Android platforms, and as well as desktop. MCSN is proud to be the first CMO in Nigeria and arguably in Africa to deploy such unique solutions system capable of monitoring what music is being played on radio and TV stations, hotels, event venues, and nightclubs across Nigeria. The MCSN Go Create app is able to monitor and track what is being streamed and downloaded on the digital service providers platforms around the world and collect mechanical and performing rights royalties for onward distribution to right owners. With this new technology, we want to wish every one of us happy World Music Day and a big congratulations to the Nigerian music industry. On this note, I want to hand over to our special guest and friend from Australia, Frank Roji, who is a leader and an expert in global collective management landscape, to give us a kind of overview with respect to copyright administration of works, at least in the Western Hemisphere. Thank you very much. Do have a happy Father's Day and a World Music Day. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Great news. All right, Frank, your turn. And you can share your screen as well. Yeah?
I will, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, and happy World Music Day and Father's Day to all the fathers in the house. I've been asked to give an overview of copyright and give you a bit of a perspective from where I work across collective rights management. And I'm just, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yep, we can see it.
And is it a full screen? Let me see.
No, it's not the full screen. Go to full.
Okay, so here we go.
Okay, here we go.
Is that a full screen for you?
Yep.
Okay, here we go.
So essentially, I'm going to just give you an overview of the Copyright 101, because I think it doesn't matter how many people work within this industry or for how long, it's always good to just get those basics, the 101, and of copyright across, and especially when we're dealing with the jargon of our world, which is incredibly complex. And I'm sure a few of you have heard of some of these acronyms and terms, but it really is a minefield of jargon and things that we have to work through. And the reason we're trying to work through it is, like has been mentioned, the goal of the CMO is to efficiently, effectively collect the money, but also, more importantly, distribute and maximize the money that's returned to the rights holders, so the writers, and also to the music publishers that are represented, and in the case of sound recordings for the labels. So I'm going to whiz past this because I'm conscious of time. But it all really begins with the song, so the musical work. And then, as we know, there's two main copyrights. There's the song, the underlying composition, but then there's the recording when it's taken into a studio or recorded in a material form. And those two fundamental areas of the creation of music form the basis of understanding the rights that we have to manage and how we work through the complexities. And understanding who owns those rights is as important as understanding the two concepts of the musical work and the sound recording. As we know with the musical work, depending on how many people contributed to the song, how the shares are split between the different writers or composers, whether there's any publishing interests, and whether those publishers are also signed locally, internationally, whether the writer or the is a member of a CMO, and how the CMOs, this is a really important point, especially in this webinar and context, the reciprocal agreements between the different CMOs. And then, of course, on the recording side, which artist, musician worked on the release? Is there shares or points being given to the producer who paid for the recording, which in most cases will be a record label? And is the label signing it for the world or for specific territories? And which CMOs are involved on the neighbouring rights side, on the sound recording side. So grappling with all of these different concepts is how we start to understand and come up with solutions to managing all of the rights and effectively distributing the money back to the rights holders. I thought I'd use a case study just to illustrate it. You know, wonderful artists, WizKid and the track Fever, which had two composers, so WizKid himself as well as a second person who composed. And so the contribution share is on this particular work a 50-50 share. But as soon as you take into account the publishers that are involved, so for WizKid it's Sony ATV, and for the other writer it's Song Trust, the performance royalty gets split 50-50 between the publisher and each of the writers. And then you have the mechanicals, which is referred to as the mechanical, which on the publishing side is split 50-50 between the two writers, publishers. Then you have the sound recording, and the artist that's represented is WizKid, but the record label is Starboy Entertainment, which WizKid actually set up himself, but that's sub-licensed then to RCA, which is part of the Sony Music Entertainment Group. So if you were trying to license this work, you would have to deal with, firstly, RCA, Sony Music, which would probably go back to Starboy Entertainment to try and clear the sound recording. But then you also need to deal with the two publishing interests in this song, Sony ATV and Song Trust, who would then go back to the two writers that they represent. So in terms of clearance, and depending on what rights are being asked to be used, there are different ways in which the user has to go about clearing those rights and where the money flows. In the world of Australia, we have only recently taken on the initiative where we're covering both the musical work and the sound recording. And at the moment, it only applies to hospitality and to nightclubs. And it's called One Music Australia. And this is where it's one license for both the sound recording and the performance of the sound recording in cafes, restaurants, nightclubs, as well as the underlying work. And of course, those different rights are split across the musical work and the sound recording according to sections within our Copyright Act, as it applies in your country with the Nigerian Copyright Act. And we touched on this already, CMOs, collective management organisations, and in most cases, they're not-for-profit entities. They're also referred to in various, depending on the rights that they control, they could be mechanical licensing companies, they could be performing rights only, as SOCAN is in Canada, for example, and in the US, most of them are only, they've got multiple collecting societies that are only on the performance right. And the types of collective management, the types of licensing can be statutory mandatory collections, which are governed obviously by the Copyright Act and statutory licenses. And then there's the other type, which is contractual or voluntary collection management. And the specific role of performing a mechanical rights organisation, like where I've worked for almost 20 years, is to represent the members. It's a writer organisation and composer organisation, and also representing the publishers who are our members. Its role is to also negotiate tariffs and other conditions with music users, license the use of the works on behalf of the members and other rights holders, and monitoring. One of the big topics that we're talking about for this seminar, it's really about monitoring when, where, and what music is used, so that the distribution of the license fees can go back to the rights holder, the correct rights holders. And of course, the assignment of rights that comes from the shareholders, which I love to call them shareholders because we talk about this as a business, but really it's a member organisation and it's the artists that feed back to the CMOs. Without the rights that are assigned by the writers, then there's no CMOs, there's no collective management. And so the whole system doesn't work without the fundamentals we talked about. It starts with music, with the song, but the song doesn't come about unless we've got members and creators and writers. And I think that, especially when we're talking internationally, the reciprocal agreements between all of the different CMOs is one of the core things that has to be consolidated, especially where these relationships have fallen down in the past. It's about making sure that we have these strong ties so that if someone represented by MCSN gets played in Australia, we can collect that money and send it back to MCSN to give that back to your artists and the publishers represented. And this is probably one of the most important points of what I want to bring to this webinar, is how important these bilateral arrangements between the CMOs are, and how we need to consolidate and make sure that these are never broken. And if they have been, how we can fix them quickly so that we can support the artists that we're all trying to support and the industry that we love so much. And just a quick overview. That's a snapshot of the type of licenses, and of course synchronization is where image is hooked in with the music, often used in film, TV and advertising. The publishers, in the case of where I've worked at AMCOS, only assign that for broadcasters, not for advertisements. That has to go back and be directly cleared by the publishers. There's mechanical licenses, which comes as an old-fashioned term from when the song used to be pressed onto vinyl, but it still refers to the reproduction of the musical work. There's public performance, a nightclub being an example of that. The communication, which often refers to the online use, the broadcast, TV, radio, and then the smaller licenses, print and educational. But all of those fall into the two main types of a blanket license, which CMOs traditionally used to only specialize in with a little bit of transactional, whereas now with the online world exploding and the way that music habits have really evolved and changed, transactional licenses have become much more part of the CMO world.
Can you hear him?
Can you guys hear me?
I can't hear him, so I don't know if
can
anybody
hear
else.
I can hear
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can
Is
hear
that
him. Yeah.
Yes,
You can go
I
a
can
little
hear
louder,
you.
but we can hear you. Okay.
okay? I'll try and speak a
Can you
little
hear
bit
him?
louder.
Yeah, I can hear
Yeah,
him.
the sound is better now.
Up the voice.
Yes.
It-
Okay, better
so
now.
is that a little bit better? So yeah, I'm just
Yes.
saying that they're all the
Yeah.
different types of licenses, but blanket licensing tends to form the traditional licensing of CMOs. But these days it's much more balanced, especially with the online world, where transactional licensing, especially when digital downloads came into the market, that was a first example of a transactional license. And as we move more and more into an identification and then a invoicing system, that is again akin to a transactional license. In the blanket licensing ecosystem, the rights are assigned by the composers, the publishers, so that you've got the CMO members assigning the rights back to enable the blanket licensing. And then you've got on the far left side, public performance, nightclubs, broadcast, online and international revenues that come in the form of blanket licensing. And then the distribution.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I can't hear Mr. Frank anymore. I don't know if anybody else is having that problem.
Is anyone else having that problem?
No,
We can still hear you.
No, we can hear
Yeah,
him.
we can still hear you.
We can hear you.
I'm sorry that you can't hear me there.
everybody, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear
All
you.
right.
Maybe
I'll-
rugged. Maybe it's got something to do with your own transmission or phone or speaker or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll push on.
Yeah, we're here.
And basically the blanket licensing is one of the key things that is of great value to a CMO is to be able to go out and say that we can give you a license for this whole bunch of music that we represent. So for a radio station not to have to go and clear every song before they play it, it's a massive, massive value add. And that is one of the big key things of blanket licensings and the value the CMOs bring to copyright owners and to music users for the simplicity. And again, the case study in One Music Australia is that now that we can do this as a joint license across the sound recording as well. So I know that MCSN already does that, but for Australia, this is something that's only come online in the last 6 to 12 months. So where you can earn, obviously the public performances from venues, from hospitality, from hairdressing salons, broadcast, online, crossing over from streaming services to downloads, which are obviously becoming less and less the way people are consuming music, to user-generated content on YouTube, to VOD services like Netflix. And then there's other types of licenses, probably more of the legacy for CDs and vinyl that's still printed and pressed, and to educational licenses. Just to give you an example of the revenue, I mean, we're about the 7th or 8th biggest music market in the world. And the CMO revenue for Australia for the last financial year was $471.8 million, which was a 12.3% increase on the previous year. So it is a significant amount of money that is collected. And I think that when we're talking about transparency, one of the things that already has become a theme of this webinar, the cost ratio is something that really is important, and it's a measure to how effective the CMO works. And I think that when, and not just to fly the flag for APRA AMCOS, but 12.9% is world's best practice. It's up there with the best in the world. And that's really the litmus test that we all need to work by: minimizing the cost, run it as efficiently as possible. So most of the money as a not-for-profit is going out the door to the songwriters, the composers, and the publishers. And to give a breakdown of the revenue, digital wasn't even on the map 15 years ago. Now it's taken over as the most significant source of revenue for us as a CMO, APRA AMCOS in Australia. That picture would be similar for CMOs around the world. Different for some of the CMOs, like in America, where it's much more fragmented and you've got 4 different performance rights CMOs. You've got Harry Fox, and now you've got the new Mechanical Licensing Collective that's come out of the Music Modernisation Act, which will start from the 1st of January next year. But in general, digital has taken over in most cases as the dominant place where revenue comes in, and where we need to make sure we get it back to the copyright owners. And when you're talking about millions, if not billions of lines of data from your DSPs, digital streaming services, the music streaming services, this is one of the big challenges in our space. And if you combine television and radio, that becomes the second most important. Broadcast really does come the second most important revenue breakdown, followed by public performances. And of course, globalization and technology has made music rights management and licensing incredibly complicated. And in the transactional world, we've moved with a lot of the services to what's referred to as the claim confirmation and invoice details system, the CCID, where a service provider, a DSP, will put through a music use report, but then the CMO has to match that within their system and be able to identify the work. And obviously, even if they own or control the work, there are a number of reasons why that match might not take place, but an invoicing for that work can't take place until it's been claimed and identified. And this is, again, another challenge that we're all working through and trying to grapple with the best way to deal with. Because if a work hasn't been registered, if the metadata is not clean, there's a number of reasons why a CCID environment is not necessarily the best for copyright owners and for artists. But it is one that's been pushed out there and is being used more and more in the digital space, and especially in transactional, the transactional ecosystem. And just to round things up, I thought we'd focus just on the identifying of music use. The different ways in which we can identify when music is played, whether it's at a nightclub or through a broadcast. There's MRT, which is better known as music recognition. If anyone has Shazammed a song in a nightclub or when they've been in a restaurant to identify what song's playing, it's using algorithms and fingerprints to try and identify a work and a song. And a music, there are commercial versions of MRT technology in the market. There's also direct metadata, which extracts the data from the source files. And in the DJ market, we've developed this technology with Pioneer DJ, which has 90% of the professional DJ market, and a technology called Kuvo. And that's what I refer to as DMC. There's also self-reporting where, especially for live performances, we as a collecting society, a CMO, have reports from artists that they can self-report when they've played or had a residency. There's also broadcast logs, and there's also analogies. So we might look at commercial radio charts if we don't have a data source in order to distribute the money, because another thing that people don't like to see CMOs doing is holding on to money. But then it's always a battle about how long you hold on to money versus sending it out to the incorrect copyright owners. So it's a balancing act on those two fronts. And I'm pleased to say that the app and what's been announced today looks very exciting for your market. And I would say that the Go Create technology that's been utilized across DSPs and broadcast monitoring is a really significant step in the right direction. And we've been doing this for nightclubs in Australia. This is one of the driving forces I've been doing using music recognition. We've signed a deal with a company out of the Netherlands for 10 years now and started using it in nightclubs, the first in the world to use it in nightclubs since 2013. And the direct metadata collection using the tech leader in the DJ market, Pioneer DJ, and their Kuvo's technology, which draws the metadata directly from the DJ decks. And we've also extended this to music festivals. So just to sum up, the CMO goals: getting played and getting paid when that happens. Transparency is a really important part of a CMO and how they stand out from the good to the not so good. Faster, accurate payments, increasing local member shares, direct distributions whenever possible, and global relevancy, which really goes back to the reciprocal agreements that I mentioned. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank. We really appreciate it, that very well put together presentation. It's a lot of information. I'm sure a lot of us, know this information, but it's new to a few of us as well. So we really appreciate you sharing that, and we'll share it on as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are at that point where we've seen all the presentations, and it's time to, discuss further.
Hello, I cannot hear anybody talking. I cannot hear anything at all.
You cannot hear anything at all. Okay. Who can't hear anything at all?
I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this.
Hi, Mr. Kenny Ogungbe. We can hear you loud and clear.
We can hear you, Kenny.
We can hear you.
This is Rugged. I experienced the same thing he was talking about. That's why I had to sign out and come back in.
In and out.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you do find that you can't
talking at all, I cannot hear anything.
Oh, and I'm sure he doesn't understand sign language, so who can tell him to sign out?
Okay, so I'm gonna chat him now and just tell him to yeah.
Hello.
So I'm gonna chat to you now. Sign out, sign in and sign out.
I can't hear anything at all.
We can hear you.
Unduka, could you just chat him? Could you chat him quickly just to sign in and sign out so that we can just get that going? All right, sign in, sign out. Let's get him sign in and sign out. All right, so in the meantime, while he's signing in and signing out, I'd like to, who else? Rugged, can you hear me? Shay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, because I'm going to ask you both to jump in at this point. I want to find out from you, and you can start, Shay, ladies first. What is the impact of the MCSN Go Create platform in terms of the music industry? Seeing as today is the flag off day, this is the new platform. And right now, as an artist, from your point of view, you haven't performed in a while. post-COVID, due to COVID lockdowns. There have been no shows, no performance fees, and now you have an opportunity to have this app, that's being used in Australia and other places globally, or apps like this, but this is our very own Nigerian one, to collect your mechanical and performance royalties that you haven't been getting before. How do you feel about that? So I'm going to have Sheyi start, and then Rugged, just share your thoughts from the artist point of view. Unmute yourself, please. Sorry, can't hear you. Unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes.
Can you hear me now, everybody? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for the question. From an artist point of view, obviously, I'm ecstatically elated. I'm very, if that even makes sense. I'm over the moon. I am a member of PRS and MCPS in the UK. I'm also a member of CESM in France, BMI in the USA. And I know what benefits I have been getting from being part of those organizations, those CMOs, as you guys would call it. So, or as we would call it. So I know that I get paid around 3 to 4 times a year from just my performance and my mechanicals, just from sitting at home, literally, from works that I've done in the past. And I've always enjoyed the benefit of being part of those CMOs. I've always wondered why we didn't have such in Nigeria, but then when you really think about it, we haven't really had a very good infrastructure when it comes to any industry, especially the music industry. And so it wasn't really a surprise to me that something like this hadn't already been erected, but I'm ecstatic and I'm very excited that we now have a structure such as this. We now have a CMO such as this. It means that now Nigerian artists, regardless of COVID or whatever, we are going to be getting paid what is rightfully ours. Because at the moment, we're only getting paid through kind of like streams and live performances and maybe telecommunications deals and endorsements, so as ambassadors and stuff. But when it comes to royalties, royalty sharing, publishing, and all this, no, nothing. So it's a great thing that you guys have done. I'm really excited that now when our music is played in clubs, on radio, TV, sync, and so on and so forth, we're going to get what's rightfully ours, which means more money in our pocket, which means happier musicians, happier artists at every level, and it means more music releases, and I'm really happy about that. So I'm going to sign up. I'm going to be a part of the whole thing, just as I am with PRS and CESM and such. And I think everybody else should too. Every other artist should too. Like, finally, we're getting what we rightfully deserve and in the right way. And there's just so much more money out there for our works. And I'm glad that people are now starting to do something about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Jay. I like the fact that you did mention the fact that you do belong to other CMOs or CMO organizations across other parts of the world, and that you are receiving benefits from that. So there's already a level of expectation of what you expect to see, in terms of performance. And we've talked today earlier
100%
about transparency, from the regulators to the actual, organization, the copyright, the Musical Copyright Society of Nigeria as well. So Rugged, your turn. What do you think about this from an artist perspective? You've been in the game for a long time, and you know what the situation is. People are coming up behind you. You're a gatekeeper. You can open the doors. You can say to them, hey, you're a voice. So does this make sense? Have you seen something like this before? What are your thoughts? No sentiment.
Obviously, no sentiment. But for me, I'm actually, like she said, I'm elated. I'm really happy about this right now. And coincidentally, it's been announced on World Music Day, so which is like really cool, extra cool. So by this time next year, it'll be like a first anniversary for it. But what I'm really, really happy about is the transparency part of it. I belong to PMAN, I belong to some other CMOs, but what I'm really happy about right now is the fact that you can actually log on your device and see how many times you've been downloaded, where you've been streamed and stuff. The transparency part of it is what I'm happy about. We've been shortchanged so many times with so many middlemen, you know, and especially this telcos. We've been shortchanged so many times, you know, and we can't exactly know how much we've made, you know, and we don't know what to compare it with to know, okay, if what I'm giving was actually what I paid and all that. But now I'm really happy about it. Now we'll be able to see it in the palm of our hands. And then also it's a big win for up and coming artists, for unsigned artists. Why I'm saying this is because if they sign up with a couple of CMOs that they can't go see the backlog, they can't see how they're being downloaded or streamed, yes, they can always be lied to with the fact that, oh, you know, you're a new artist, your song is really not that popular, so don't expect any money right now. But with this app, and if he or she puts in enough money into promotion, you can get one song, even if it's not, you don't become as big as Wizkid immediately. Even if it's 10 kobo, you will see how much, you will see it and you will get paid. So this would definitely improve on the creativity of our young artists. At least now they know that if they put out music, there's a place where they can go to check it. When I saw the artwork of the app, you know, it just reminded me, I just saw something and I thought to myself, I've been seeing this, if you're all on Instagram, if you check insights, you can check how many percent, the female percentage, the male percentage of people who viewed your post. You can check how many clicks on the website. And I've always been thinking to myself, if this can be done on Instagram, on Twitter, why can't we get something like this for music? Exactly.
Right. Why don't we have metrics?
Why don't we have it for music in Nigeria? No transparency. You know, so people have come in, blocked Nigerian creatives. They've blocked us for too long and just eating our money. So I'm happy about this app. I'm happy it's a Nigerian one. And I'm happy I have like a whole catalog. Well, not as much as Oga Orisuli Kisha, but I know I have a lot. And I'm happy I have that.
This will even ginger you to go and create more catalog, right? This will ginger you. Because now you're like,
you know, as I'm speaking to you, I have an EP that's dropping next month. I have a situation EP dropping next month. So, and I have some young artists who are the EP. So we're all going straight. I'm bringing everybody straight to register. MCSN, register, because look, split sheets, you collect your percentage, I collect my own. We're all right. So it's going to work for everybody. This is something that's been done. That's
win-win.
Doing in America, doing in Europe, doing in the land down under, Australia. Nigeria, we have over 200 million. You understand? So it's a welcome development, and at least for once, good news.
Good news. Sorry. Digital news. Okay, we're going digital. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. All right, I want to say that we have about 10 more minutes. I want to throw this conversation now, the question to as a rights user, like an end user, you know, who has a radio station, who's going to be playing the music, who's going to have to be paying, right? So from the artist perspective, I know you're all happy. You're like, yeah, we're getting paid. But then the user perspective, the broadcasters who, you know, there's some tension there. And so I want Mr. Kenny Ogungbe to sort of sound off and tell me, how will this affect you as an end user in terms of transparency? Now, everybody, okay, I'm sure that you were looking for you know, some type of a solution as well, because you also want to know that I'm paying a certain amount out. Why is this my tariff? Where are my reports? What do you think? What are your thoughts about this?
He's stuck in the middle because he's also a record label owner.
Yes.
So
right. So you got to think. So let's get your
the win-win situation for him.
From that side of your brain and your business, that is the end user, right? So you're using the music, and then from the record label side, you know, then we'll talk about that. So let's start first with the end user point of view. Mr. Kenny Ogungbe.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ragadi Baba. Thank you, my chairman, Oris Philip. All right, thank you, guys. Well, I'm wearing two caps. I'm a broadcaster. I use the works. I also create works, like confirmed by Ragadi Baba and chairman Oris Philip. for the broadcast angle. Definitely, it's a good thing that we paid. We paid the copyright associations. We pay them money, and again, that's all. As a broadcaster, even at our meeting, our broadcasting organizations of Nigeria's meeting, they said that we paid these people. Did they pay the people they're supposed to pay? They always ask questions. If they didn't pay, I'm not paying this year. They always ask questions. And again, they get calmed down that we signed with these people that will pay. That is all. We did not sign that they should send us who they pay or how they pay. And again, this one is going to be very transparent because it's going to tell everybody who Cool FM plays, who Beat FM plays, who Kennis FM plays in a very transparent way. It's a very transparent way so that everybody will be aware of what's going on. And again, it's also good for the technology. You know, Africa is the last to embrace technology. I'm sorry to say that. And again, it's coming at this time, which is also good. World Music Day is the day that this is being launched. But I have a question. I have a question for MCSN. I have a question for Australia. And again, before I start to talk about as a user. And again, the question basically is the DG, Mr. John Hassian said, good afternoon, sir, my DG. He said that title specific distribution, which means if I play Whiskey, I play Two-Face Idibia or Two Baba now as it's being referred to, is it the one collecting the money or is the money thrown in the basket when everybody shares the money? Then what the DG said we should explore title distribution. This type of technology, when everybody knows the title being played by radio stations, it is going to be well organized, transparent, everybody will see, and everybody will be happy. No. Compared to what is happening currently, you don't know who is being paid. And again, we just said that was being changed, and was not paid enough, whereas the music Cool FM did not play. Music FM did not pay. They earn it from the money that we paid to the agency. That also should be looked at. I know the musicians, they need to be paid for what you call it now, after retirement.
Royalties. Mm-hmm.
They will pay royalties. Pension. I was looking for the word pension. Yes. Okay. And it looks like that they're getting paid by pension to this money. Pension. Of the money.
I think that might be a different conversation.
When the radio stations, the TV stations did not play their work, and again they are getting paid. The ones that they are paying their work, they are not getting paid enough, and they are upset. And again, this will make the whole thing very clear, and people will see, and people will be happy.
Okay, so let's. I thank you so much for your input. Let's hold the question. I'm going to put that down as a something for us to come back to, Frank, and also Mr. Mayo. Please let's come back to that, which is the question about the title specific distribution. Okay, so that is something that he's concerned about. Like, okay, are we? It's just a blanket, because you remember, Frank, you mentioned something about the blanket fees, right? So the for the industry, like a blanket fee that they pay, and then the broadcasters pay that fee, and then it covers everything, which kind of simplifies versus a title specific. So I want to let's hold that question, and then we'll come right back to it. Because I want one last person who hasn't really spoken at all, Mr. Godwin Tom, to also weigh in on the impact of this MCSN Go Create platform in terms of managing artists, right? So you run iManage Africa, you have a whole bunch of artists with catalogs, and they're performing post-COVID. Hopefully that will go back to normal. What is the impact of this type of transparency or transparent platform or digital platform to you and to the industry in your capacity? Mr. Godwin Tom, I'm handing over to you.
All right, thank you very much. All protocols observed. I think the first thing I'd like to say, Mr. Frank, would you be open to sharing your presentation? I think that's great education for a lot of people on this side, and would appreciate that as well.
Happy to share that.
Fantastic. The other thing I wanted to mention is, I mean, I've had conversations with the previous exclusive rights collection organization, and I realized one big issue as a manager. One of the biggest issue is the fact that there's a lot of people who say things from outside don't have any information. So I'm using this opportunity to get rights owners, managers, artists, performers to start asking questions. I know there's a lot of, I mean, you've asked me about how excited I am about how this will work. And I want to speak cautiously because we haven't really used it yet, right? I believe that every app grows as you use, and you're able to identify errors and add things to it and
Right.
build it. But I think that what we all need to do is get into a mindset where we're asking more questions about the people who are involved in leadership. There is, I know that over the last few years, there's been this attitude of crusade against collaboration. And I think that's another thing we need to eliminate. We need to start working together to figure out the best ways that we can create opportunities. As a manager, I think another thing I wanted to point out is, I'm just going to ask a series of questions, right? Just to share, just so that it's quick. I wanted to also understand, because for us to get participation from rights owners, which is one of the only way that these things work, is we would need those people to also feel educated, right? They need to feel informed. They need to know how MCSN as an organization works. They need to know how do they lay complaints? How are decisions made? Are there elements of the Articles of Association that we should know about? So if my artist comes to register, how are decisions made? How are those decisions changed? How is transparency checked? These are all very important questions that rights owners and my clients would like to know. And I think that there's a lot of education that needs to go into creating that transparency as well. I also believe that we need to check conflict of interest. Now, the reason why I say this is because when we started this initial, I've been in the industry for about 16, 18 years now. So compared to the other people here, I'm a child, right? And one of the things I've seen in that time is that we fought one collecting society and created a new one. And now we've come back to that collecting society. And what I'm asking is, what are the things that have changed outside technology, right? Because as much as it's transparent, I do know that technology can be manipulated. And I want to be able to say, if we sense that there's a concern, what do we do to ensure those things don't happen? Are there conflict of interest that we should worry? And have those conflicts been communicated to everybody? Another question is, how is it going to track broadcast, this new app that has been developed? Is it going to track broadcast in terms of how content is being used? And just basically knowing how it will monitor. I don't think we can do all of that here, but I'm saying—
No, we can't. We're almost out of time.
Yeah, I think it's important that the organization recognizes the need to start the education of people immediately so they know what they're getting into. Because one of the biggest issues we have with CMOs is an issue of trust.
Okay, thank you so much. Those are really, really salient points, and I appreciate your sharing those with us, Mr. Godwin Tom. Very important. Just to summarize that, education would be key, and declaration of conflicts of interest, or how the organization works, how MCSN works, what are the modus operandi. And I think I'd like to just jump in quickly just to say, look, this is the reason why we're doing this. This is the reason why we're having these conversations, webinars. A lot of the questions that come out of today's session are going to be addressed in upcoming webinars, right? And we're going to continue to develop this as a series of webinars to sort of guide the new face of the industry, to guide the development of this app. Like you rightly mentioned, it needs to be used The artists will jump in. If this doesn't really work for us, the managers will jump in. The users, from Mr. Kenny Ogungwe's point of view, will jump in as well to say, hey, we still have some questions about this. And as you can see, the regulators are in the house as well. They're not going anywhere. NCC is in the house, as well as MCSN will continue to have this conversation. And we have Mr. Frank Rodi, who is also a consultant for us. We'll continue to refine until we get this right. The whole idea is that we want this to work. It is a new era. And yes, trust is an issue. There's a lot of history and water under the boat. But today is about the future and saying that this is the new future. And it's about transparency, and we're going to make it work. So those are all the questions that we can take today in terms of discussion. The rest of it, we'll table it. Of course, everybody can join in to just send information. I want this on the screen, that if you have any questions, you can email to info@mcsnnigeria.org. Again, let's have a quick summary. So I want us to go to the summary slide. Could we go to summary slide, because before we get kicked off by Zoom, summary slide, Nduka. And so on the summary slide, let me just get started until it comes up on the screen. Basically, the summary for today, again, is that the time is now for the adoption of digital technology for the enforcement of copyright laws in the music industry. And there are going to be amazing benefits to the entire music industry if we can get this right, which we plan to, right? And we've heard from the Australian case studies on how this needs to be implemented. Frank Rodi is going to share his deck with us. We're going to break that down and use it as ongoing webinars, trainings, so that the entire industry starts to understand that this transparency, we're not joking around with it, that we're serious about it. MCSN itself will deploy the Go Create platform for use by artists, record labels, and end users starting in July. Mr. Mayo did mention that. And from tomorrow, Monday, June 22nd, pre-registration drive will start up to sign up artists. And, based on some of your recommendations, Mr. Godwin Tom, we will make sure that education is upfront and personal. And so before we go, because I don't want to end this without handing back over to our host for today, Mr. Mayowa Ayilara, who is the CEO for MCSN. Could you say a couple of final words before we get kicked off? You got 1 minute. Unmute yourself, sir.
About that.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you so much, Faith. My signing off word today will just be a great appreciation to all participants once again. The DG, NCC, John, very grateful for your attendance, and we feel highly honored for your the keynote address. Frankie, thank you for your intervention, your in-depth lecture, will I call it. It's a good one for us, and we are on the same page. I also thank Rugged Man, the Ruggedy. I understand your fear, and I can assure you that the fear is well noted, and I believe that by the time we come back to see each other, you'll be happy that you are part of this event or this project, so to say. I would like to also thank Keke. Also, your fear, yes, you are speaking for both sides, both the publishers, the record label, as well as the users, the broadcasters. But yes, we have a good understanding with Bond, but the point still remains that a lot of your members are not really doing what they are expected to do. You know, when we signed that agreement in those days, we gave them some guidelines, particularly on logging, submitting the logs of what they actually pay, which they didn't do. But now we are taking that off their neck, which means we are going to do the logging by ourselves by tracking for you. So that's good one for you there. So it's a good assurance to you that you have nothing really to worry about in that area. Godwin Tom, I think Faith has adequately addressed your fear. You will see the development as we go along. And I thank you very much for the kind of warning you have given that we are just starting out. And anything human cannot be perfect from the word go. We'll continue to improve upon any lapses that may come along. We will not say we have a foolproof technology, but we are assuring you that we are giving the best that is available presently to our people and to the world at large. Mr. Amedu, of course, we didn't hear any word from you, and I believe the DG has spoken for you and for Obi. I thank you for coming. My chairman, Oris, I thank you for your backing. You are always there like the rock of Gibraltar. You are really there. We thank you very much. So back to Faith. I thank you very much, and I'll be signing off now. Thanks. You're welcome.
All right. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Happy World Music Day. Thank you, Frank Rody. I know it is very early in the morning, Australian time. I appreciate you joining us. Please don't leave us behind. We do need your guidance, obviously, to continue to refine and build. And, you talked very clearly about the reciprocal agreements between all the different CMOs in different countries. So that will be something that will be major, moving forward, the integration. And we're looking forward to having more of these. This is live right now on YouTube. It'll be going on Nigezie. It'll be going on HIP TV. It'll be available as an educational tool for the industry to refer to over and over again. And we'll be developing more of these webinars, as we go forward, so that everybody starts to understand where this train is moving to. Everything will be transparent, where this train is moving to. And education is going to be a huge part of it. And we thank you to all the regulators that joined us today, to the organizations that are in the house, whether you're a user, whether you're an artist, we're all in the music business and the business of music in a digital era. And for now, I'm signing off. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers in the house.
Last word for Business Day, our partner in the project. We salute you. We thank you very much, Business Day, Nigeria. Thanks very much. Faith, over to you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. You can leave now. We appreciate you. And thanks to all the music industry people that are watching us from across Nigeria. Thank you for joining us. We'll be signing off now. Goodbye.
Bye.